Welcome to Lab Rats Cooperative Learning's pre-lesson number 1. This year we will be learning biology, and this little pre-lesson will teach you not only how to work your way through class, but also kind of how to science in general. So first things first, you're going to need to have your class binder and a pencil handy. An extra credit, yes, there is an extra credit opportunity associated with this assignment. You'll be given instructions during the assignment, so you're going to want to pay attention. If you haven't already done so, read and scan through the syllabus and preface section of your binder. That's in the very front. You'll notice that your binder's pages are subdivided by section and are numbered accordingly within each section. Once you've skimmed, read through the syllabus and preface, turn to the first page of Lesson 1. So flip through the pages of Lesson 1 and notice the blank spaces. You'll often have blank spaces to fill in as part of your weekly assignment. You'll fill in these blanks as you work through each week's lesson by reading or by watching this video, for example. And these pages will remain in your binder to help you study and prepare for tests. Now, you're usually going to have a homework assignment each week. This is going to be at the end of your weekly lesson and before you get to that week's lab. This page will show you whether it's to be completed online through your portal or if it is completed on paper and uploaded to your portal. If you haven't already logged into your Teacheries account, you're going to want to pause the video and do that right now. You should have gotten an email that gives you your login and password. So on the back of your weekly homework assignment page, you will find an image of Rico, our mascot. Each week, you will have the opportunity to color him according to a theme and turn him in for a prize. Even if you are to do your assignment through the portal, and a lot of them will be done that way this year, you still have the opportunity to color Rico and hand him in person. Keep flipping through your binder. At the end of each section, you'll find your weekly lab. So you're going to have lesson, homework, lab every week. Sometimes you're going to turn in your lab the following week. Sometimes you're going to complete it in class. Occasionally, you'll be able to upload it through your portal. Now flip back to the first page of Lesson 1. Did you notice that the syllabus entry for a lesson is repeated on the first page of that lesson? So over on the left, you have an example of Lesson 1. This is actually from chemistry class, but it's just a good example to show. And right there you have on the very beginning page of that lesson, your assignment for the week. And if you look at your syllabus, it's identical. It just has both Junior Lab Rats and Lab Rats side by side. To know what assignments are due each week, you can look either place. You can also check your portal. It's a pretty good place to look as well. So cool. Now that you know what to do, let's get started. Open your binder to the first page of Lesson 1, or pre-lesson 1 in this case, and have your pencil ready.
Rico presents How to Science.
So what is science? Google defines science like this: the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. Now that's a mouthful, so we're going to break it down. Let's say intellectual means mental. Practical, we're going to say hands-on. Encompassing, we'll use the word surrounding. For systematic, we'll say organized. For structure, it's regarding construction. Behavior, we'll say actions. Physical, we'll say touchable. Natural, we'll say real. Observation, we'll use the word watching. And for experiment, we'll use the word testing. Now let's try to redefine that definition. So now it becomes the mental and hands-on activity surrounding the organized study of construction and actions of the touchable and real world through watching and testing. Well, that's a little easier to understand. This is still a bit of a mouthful, so let's say it more simply: the study of the natural world through knowledge about the natural world that is based on facts learned through observation and experiment. So science is broken down into 3 main branches. You have your formal sciences, natural sciences, and social sciences. Your formal sciences involve mathematics, logic, and statistics. Your social sciences involve societies and human behavior. And your natural sciences are broken down into 2 main branches: physical science and life science. Under physical science, you have things like astronomy, physics, earth science, and chemistry. And then under life science, which is also the word for biology, you will have botany, ecology, zoology, genetics, this sort of thing. There are many, many, many subdivisions and disciplines of science that aren't included here. So what are the big ideas in biology? Well, the big ideas in biology include evolution. The process of evolution drives the diversity and unity of life. We also have energy. Biological systems utilize free energy and molecular building blocks to grow, to reproduce, and to maintain dynamic homeostasis. There's also information. Living systems store, retrieve, transmit, and respond to information essential to life processes. And lastly, systems. Biological systems interact, and these systems and their interactions possess complex properties. Scientific theory versus scientific law. This is a big concept that I tell every student I teach to take with them forever and ever and ever. This is a storeway in your brain. Scientific theories versus scientific laws. When studying science, what's the difference between a theory and a law? A scientific law tells what happens, a fact. A scientific theory tells why it happens, an explanation. If you memorize those two sentences, that will take you far in science. A scientific law tells what happens, a fact. A scientific theory tells why it happens, an explanation. Important. In this class, we're going to study scientific law and scientific theory. For example, and this one comes up always in biology, there are multiple theories of origin. How do we get here? How do human beings get on this planet? This class is a science class, so we're going to teach it from a scientific perspective. Any theories of origin discussed in this class will be scientific theories. If you were in a philosophy class or a cultural diversity class or a religion class, you would be discussing origin theories from a different perspective. But in this class, we're going to discuss scientific theories. Different people hold different personal and religious beliefs. It's safe to assume that all questions and answers in this class are prefaced with an unvoiced according to scientific theory, rather than I personally believe that. Why is measurement important? All right, well, we measure lots of things. If you stop and think about it, you'll realize that measurements surround you on all sides. And guess what? They matter. So here are some things that we measure. We measure length. We measure mass, which is how much matter there is. We measure weight. Weight is the effect of gravity on your mass. We measure area, which is 2 dimensions, like how many tiles fit on a floor. We measure volume in 3D. For example, how much liquid goes into this particular cupcake recipe. We measure density, which is how much mass is contained in a space. And that definitely is a good example there. It can show you what sinks and what floats. And that's based on density and whether or not something is more or less dense than the medium it's floating in or sinking in. Time and temperature. So in the US, we commonly use the imperial standard or customary system. And this is the one you're used to. Inches, yards, tablespoons, cups, ounces, feet, all this stuff. In science and actually in most other countries, the metric system is most often used. So this is grams, kilograms, liters, and meters. Those might be unfamiliar to you, but they're very easy to work with because it's all base 10. Everything is times 10 or divided by 10, which is not the case with standard, customary, or imperial system. So this is a graphic showing you what the metric conversion, how metric conversion works. Basically, you've got your unit in the middle, and then you go, if you're dividing by 10, if you go to the left, and you multiply by 10 if you go to the right. And there are some examples of this in your binder for you to work with, and we'll be doing it all year. How do you present scientific data? Scientific notation, there at the bottom, is one way we present data. It's how you take a very big number and make it a little more digestible. So data are the information gained from observing and testing an experiment. The word data is actually a plural word. The singular word is datum. Scientists use data to gain understanding and make conclusions. What's a hypothesis? A hypothesis is an idea that can be tested. So what are the requirements for a testable hypothesis? In order to be considered testable, it must be possible to prove that the hypothesis is supported, which you might think of as true, but the better word is supported. Or it must be possible to prove that the hypothesis is rejected, which you might think of as not true, but rejected is the better term. And It must be possible to reproduce the results of this hypothesis. If you do an experiment and you get a result one time, that doesn't necessarily mean your hypothesis is either supported or rejected. You should have to repeat that experiment in order to confirm your results. Many scientific hypotheses are proposed in an if-then format because it's easy to design an experiment to see whether or not a cause and effect relationship exists between independent, which sometimes we refer to as manipulated variables, and dependent or responding variables. What if the hypothesis is proved or supported? A scientist will make sure that she can repeat her process and replicate her results. What if a hypothesis is rejected or not proved? A scientist will revise his hypothesis and often repeat the experiment. Scientific method. So here's the scientific method. The scientific method is the way we test our hypotheses. It's the way we conduct a controlled experiment. And there aren't really a series of steps that are always perfect. It just has to do with limiting your variables and working towards supporting or rejecting a hypothesis. So our types of variables are independent, dependent, or controlled variables. A controlled experiment is an experiment in which only one variable, the independent variable, is deliberately changed at one time. Your independent variable is what you're changing. Your dependent variable is what you're observing because of the change. And your controlled variable is what you're going to keep the same every time. Be a good scientist. A good scientist engages in arguments using evidence, obtains, evaluates, and communicates information, asks questions and defines problems, constructs explanations and designs solutions, develops and uses models, uses math and computational thinking, plans and carries out investigations, and analyzes and interprets data. This is a quote. I definitely don't think that Dr. Frankenstein was a good scientist. He didn't take responsibility for the finished product. When it didn't perform as he wanted, when it didn't meet his expectations, he turned his back on it. That left the rest of the world to have to deal with it. And here are some other quotes by some people who have worked in the field of biology in particular. One way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? What if I knew I would never see it again? Rachel Carson. Life is not found in atoms or molecules or genes as such, but in organization, not in symbiosis, but in synthesis. Edwin Grant Conklin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Charles Darwin. I am among those who thinks that science has great beauty. A scientist in his laboratory is not only a technician, he's also a child placed before the natural phenomena which impress him like a fairy tale. Marie Curie. Settled science. Lastly, never forget, no matter who says otherwise, science is never settled. Why is it such a wrong-headed assertion? You're going to hear the science is settled a lot, primarily in media. But this is the problem with it. It presumes that science exists in a binary state, that science isn't settled until it crosses some imaginary line after which it's finally settled. On the contrary, science is by its very nature never 100% settled. It also presumes that poor understanding in one area of science invalidates good understanding in other areas. This is not the case. Natural science is not about absolute proofs. It never reaches 100% certainty. This is the domain of the formal sciences, such as mathematics and logic. Science is about improving our understanding by narrowing uncertainty. Different areas of science are, and likely always will be, understood with varying degrees of confidence. Galileo Galilei proved the sun was at the center of our solar system, not Earth, as previously thought. Charles Darwin introduced the world to the theory of natural selection, which provided the first explanation for the idea of evolution. Joseph Lister applied germ theory to create the concept of sterile surgery. Alfred Wegener originated the theory of continental drift, and Robert Goddard was laughed at for suggesting we could travel to space using a rocket. Who will make the next great discovery? You never know. It could be you.